chocolate balls with chocolate on the inside, and then a nougat. And oh, you can hurt yourself badly.
I can hurt myself on anything sweet.
And me too, Martin.
Well, I'm glad to see everybody can make it. Now let's get down to business.
Yeah.
What kind of business?
You.
All in all,
You.
I was going to say, Marie, if you haven't told all of these people about getting the truck stuff, please don't. I want you to tell it.
Oh, God.
I've heard it 15 times.
It's hilarious.
I want you to tell about Wileen and the ink.
Wileen what?
And the ink.
Oh, weak.
Wileen. Is that the daddy with the ink in it? No, that wasn't me.
It's safe now, Wileen.
He won't come back home to
The night Daddy reached over and put his finger in the ink.
No, he reached over and picked up the bottle and turned it over like this. Stick his finger in there to get that big salve, and it just happened not to be big salve, it was ink. And he went all over, and Mama run in the bathroom, you know, and shut the door and laughed for a while. And he said, Wileen, what are you doing? She go in and she get straight up, she come back in there, you know, all she could. And then Ricky said, I don't know who did it. I'm going to find out who did this. And messing with around my table, this, that, the other. He'd go to country. Mama would run back in the bathroom and shut the door again, you know. Wileen, what are you doing? I can hear it right now.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, she said it was.
Yes. Joe, these are good. They're real. I like both.
He's a
Oh, that's good.
There's not too much lemon in that one?
Daddy, how do you like it? Is that what you're eating? The prune pudding? Don't you love it?
It's interesting,
Yeah,
isn't
it
it?
is interesting. I mean, it's not like anything I've ever heard of.
It's different.
It's what? It is. It is. It's
not like
different.
anything she'd ever
No.
had before.
But I do like it. I do like it.
I hadn't ate it in years and years. When you hear prunes, you don't think about a dessert, do you?
No. In fact, what I think about is granddad's place at the table with a little glass of fruit juice. Right next to it. In those green glasses that, you know, that have the bumps on them.
Yeah.
The beads.
Yeah.
Those are great tea glasses.
Let me get you some.
I don't get me some prune pudding in them.
Yeah, that little glass
I'm
goes.
gonna build in here, right in here in the same bowl.
Those pretty.
I'm so afraid.
I love those
somebody
bowls.
has to
I
wash
do too.
dishes.
I got it in left on my hands.
Oh, my good.
You don't have an oven yet?
So
I'm
y'all,
not
when was
going
the
to
last time you
have
were
a
all
baking
together?
oven for Christmas, people.
You gotta do what?
Oh, we hadn't gotten together in a long time.
What was the, remember the last time
We'll
y'all
not have
got
one.
together?
When was the last time we were all together?
2 years ago in Albany.
No, it was right before Ginger Marsh died that day. Well, the Satchin was not there, and Dick was not there.
Yes.
Those were there.
That's true.
Where
At
was
your
that?
house.
Oh, at
Yeah, last time.
Yeah. And the time before that, was it Blackbeard's one night?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the time, that's when we went on that.
Blackbeard.
Yeah.
That place with Blackbeards.
Well, we all got together one night to eat. And that was a good place at that time to eat.
You know what's important when you get this age? I don't know whether you're old enough to know yet.
What she's saying is when you get to this age, you don't think about anything else but eating. That's what you think about eating.
No, little
Let's put it a little more taste.
It's so sad.
Bill.
Who are you
Let's put it a
talking?
little more delicate. That's one of life's real pleasures.
See, Patty, I told you you're too young to be behaving like that.
Hey,
Patty's
Will.
acting now.
Hey, I didn't see you.
Hey,
talking.
Will, I didn't
Hey,
see
Will.
you either.
Hey, Will. Hey, Will.
Hey, how are you, Uncle Will?
Hey, buddy. Tell him he's wrong. He's not the uncle.
Hey, you know, don't have anything to eat?
No.
That's a second child.
Why, you know?
They don't have.
He just got back from basketball
Well-
practice, so he's probably more thirsty right now.
Well,
was
did you go to school?
I've
Yeah.
seen him down and
That usually mine was always going to eat when he got back.
Are you a good basketball player, Will?
Well, what kind of shirt is
Can't all be,
This is my old,
Veteran dog in Chapel Hill, North
it's
Carolina.
my old elementary school.
Yes, it is.
It was also the only white shirt that was clean.
Are you a good basketball player?
Annie Evans said she
No,
did that because she was.
I was, yeah, she was a good.
Ellie was
she
good, and Lulu was too.
Yeah, Lulu
I
was.
wasn't first in, and
Well,
she was
I'd say it's my
following
second
those
best.
guys.
You what now?
My second
Yo.
best sport.
You want
That's
some
your
blueberry
second
white?
best.
Soccer.
Soccer is your best sport. Okay. All right.
But you do like basketball. Where'd Joe go?
Good.
You wanna get back?
Yo, who?
Oh, I see.
Hey, what is that
Right here.
round circle up there on that picture?
I've been wondering the same
That's a
thing.
halo.
Keep
That's
looking
what
at
it's
his
like.
halo.
That's what a halo.
I figured it was.
I put it on there.
I put that there.
I
I
would have
figured
bet
that
on
was what it was, but I wondered who had put it
St.
there.
Patty. St. Patty.
He says that when I'm having company over, I'm extra sweet when I'm getting ready for.
Don't you dare pull that on me.
Yeah. And Joe said she comes by it honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She is sweet. You know, I was talking about that tale I remembered about Jean. I can't remember whether it was in the summer of 42 or 43. It was during the war. And Harvey Minders was in the South Pacific, and he was gone for 4 or 5 years before he ever even came back. His child was 4 years old before he ever saw him.
He's somebody from Camilla.
Yeah, and his wife and Lorena Palmer, they are sisters, and they carried Jean and me and Nina Simmons, who was their niece, who was her niece, and we went to Jacksonville to the beach. Well, stayed in a little motel down there, and we liked to go there because they had a boardwalk, an old-fashioned boardwalk, with all the rides and all that stuff. And we went really well fixed. We each one of us had $20, and that was big bucks back then, big bucks. And
Was that gonna pay for your room and your meal?
no, we already paid it. That was what we ate out.
Okay.
$20 would have paid for several nights.
It went down. Yeah, it would have. You laugh, but it
would.
That was supposed to be good. But anyway, back then we didn't carry purses. We didn't. Nobody ever, no young person ever carried a purse, but we always had a wallet. And I had a pocket in my sundress, and it had it was on the seam, and it was just there. I stuck my wallet down in there. We went on a ride, and when we got off and got ready to do something else, my wallet was not in my pocket. It was gone. So we went back. Of course, it had been running continuously, and it was long gone. No sign of it. Well, I was just bereft because we were. Our stay was about half, and I just didn't know what in the world I was going to do. And Jean said, "Don't worry, Lulu, I got $10 left. I'll give you half of what I've got. Then we'll have the same thing." And I said, "I can't do that." And she said, "Well, it's not going to be any fun for me if you don't have it." So that's what she did. She gave me half of what she had, and I said, "Well, I'll pay you back when I get home." She said, "You will not." Just like, but this was the way she was. She said, "I'll give you half of what I have left, and we'll both have some money."
You talking about no matter what money was back in those days, I can remember when Daddy had black or wild bill, but paid them $5 a week, and they were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whenever he needed them, night or day, they were there. And he paid them $5 a week.
But they were prone to want to, when there was a burial, they were prone to want to borrow the vehicle. On Sunday afternoon, and that was some
That's
big
the way you kept 'em.
soiree.
You kept 'em
It was
dead.
worse than
Yeah.
it was
That's the way you
worse than
kept 'em.
an Irish wake. Everybody in 15 counties who had any kind of way to go would go, and they'd all get tanked up and then just
Yeah, but you
Had a
know,
hard time.
the thing, how things have changed, you remember back on Saturdays.
Ooh,
Come dinner time, everybody began to take the cars uptown and park them on the street so they get a good parking place so they could sit in the car and watch. Everybody in the county would come by, you know, because everybody in the county was in town on Saturday night and Saturday afternoon. And you couldn't push them with a stick, and the store stayed open 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And all the country people go by and buy groceries when they got to town, and then if they had any money left, you know, they'd buy liquor and stuff like that with it. But they'd leave the groceries at the grocery store until they got ready to go home, and then go by and pick them up, you know, and put them on the wagon or whatever they were in, you know, and carry them on with them. But things have changed since then.
And one of the most active spots in town was that old pump there.
Yeah.
The Summerside.
Down there where the
It's
old
still standing there
Cali
now.
boots used to be.
No, it's right there in on the edge of the.
Oh, yeah.
Big old,
Right, I know where you're talking.
The
Next to the
courthouse.
courthouse.
property. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sure there was. And then they were down there under those oak trees was where they tied up
The
the
mules and
and
all
the
that.
horses and the wagons.
And then there on Court Street,
Yeah.
you remember the horse trough, concrete horse trough there. And Ben Hill Cochran kept catfish in there, keep down the mosquitoes.
Yeah. And how do you remember how when they had the monument up yonder in the middle of the street?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody sat on going out there and sit on the monument at night and watch everybody drive by, you know. And they had to drive around you, you know, sitting out there on the monument and whatnot. No, you see everybody in town if you sat there a while.
We rode every night down to the McNair Hotel and back up around the monument down to the
And
McNair
now
Hotel.
East End, and then back
All
up.
night long. All night long.
That's what you call trolling.
Trolling. And you know, back then when they had the monument there, they had a little old police station right in the middle of the street there, you know, down toward the McNair Hotel. The police station was right there in the middle of the street.
That's a little box one
Yeah.
like they have in England.
Yeah, well, man, Tuggle spent his life.
About the same
Had a heater
population
in
we
there
got
because
now.
of that.
Huh?
Had about the same population then we got now. 6 or 8 police cars, about 25 police cars.
Yeah.
But do you remember that during World War II they had a plane spotting, same little house that they stuck right in the middle of the sidewalk there at the entry to the front entry to the courthouse, and we spent hour after hour after hour with our binoculars looking for nothing, trying to identify the plane and call internal field and say, well, so and so just went over. It's authorized.
Pearl Harbor type attacks to the
That was so we wouldn't be bombed on the way.
And I remember when Daddy spent all the money he had to get Ellen a pet. She brought her a little goat about that high. She had to raise on a bottle. She caught him up out on the river and brought him to her. And I never ever get that goat river. Yeah, okay. Well, that goat.
What I remember is Daddy went on a trip one time. And this was the
believe I can
crazy,
get out.
you wouldn't believe this, but I'd never had a pair of high heel shoes, and I was young.
Oh, what are you?
8th grade, I guess. He brought me back a pair of red high heels that fit me to a.
Are you serious? Daddy did?
Daddy did.
Are you talking about the same Daddy I know?
Wait, she just revealed something about our daddy. He had a thing about red high heels. Because when your daddy was in Korea, and he and Jean had decided they were in love with each other and they were going to be married when he got back. Only he didn't have any way to get an engagement ring. So one weekend, Mama and Daddy and Jean and I spent the weekend in Atlanta. They came from Camilla and I went over from Athens and met them, and we stayed in the hotel up there, and we found her engagement ring.
Oh.
And bought it. And afterwards, for my consolation prize, we went to Thompson Bowling Lee across the street.
Oh, gosh.
And he was going to buy me a pair of shoes. And what
Who is that?
if you can, my daddy, if you can fathom, if you can look at this old gray-haired woman and understand, I came out of that place with a pair of platforms. That the platform was that high. They were red kid slingback shoes
Mine was slingback.
that had a 4-inch heel on them. And that was those are the ones my daddy picked out that he thought looked the best on me. So he had a thing about red shoes.
It was blue suede shoes with him, they were red shoes with him.
Well, I missed my pair of red.
You missed out on that.
Why you didn't get a red pair?
No, I never got a pair of red heels.
Y'all remember, you were talking about money a minute ago. Do you remember when Aunt Lucy used to bring us to Albany, take us to Albany Christmas shopping?
Oh.
And we all had $1 a piece to buy Christmas.
Now, wait a minute, I can't let that go back unchallenged because the people who were really responsible for that were Aunt Helen and Uncle Allison. They didn't have any children. And they started years back and they would not take you until you were a certain age. And by the time you guys got to be the right age, it was 2 cars full. But they used to pack about 8 of us in their car. And we would go and each one of us would have maybe $1 to do all of our Christmas shopping. And they parked on the main street in Albany and in the area of all 3 dime stores. And we worked those dime stores to
Did you remember that? Did you go?
We didn't. It wasn't Helen and Allison.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give everybody $1?
We carried our own money now. But what they did after we got through shopping, they'd herd us all back in the car and take us out to the Black Cat, which was a drive-in out there with not a very good reputation. But we could all have a hot dog and a drink, couldn't we? And if they were really flush that year, if the hungry ones could have 2 hot dogs. And they cost a dime.
But it was a treat. It really was.
I've got a great
Look
big
forward to.
jar of book matches. They're at least 50 years old. It's got the Black Cat and the White House and all those things in it. It's still sitting up there in my house right now.
That's a curiosity now, because
You
it's
remember
not
one
in my
old,
memory.
when Dot Fitzgerald had that little old hamburger place
Right
up
there
yonder, you
next
know?
to Union
You
Supply.
get a hamburger there, a good one that ever been made for a dime. And it was in a little old place, and it had screen wire all the way around it, you know, and all that was her way of getting all the smoke out of there. And she cooked in there and everything, had a dirt floor. And you just had sawdust down on the floor and all, and you'd go in there and sit at the counter, and you get hamburgers or hot dogs or
How did you get to go in there? Mother wouldn't let me eat a thing out of there.
well, it's a lot of difference. I was the man.
I nearly died going by there smelling those shit. You just throw onions on that grill, you know, with those hamburgers, and you just almost drop dead. Salivate
I remember
yourself
Dixie
then.
Kitchen around there.
Yeah. Well, this was where this is where
Parking lot.
the county seat was. Is where they had that little old hamburger joint there, of Dorothy
I
Fitzgerald.
remember that.
I do, just
I
I
do.
can remember.
I remember
Right,
too.
it was sort of a lean-to type thing there on the wall of
It was
what you
right
supplied.
right about where Reliable Loans is
Yeah.
now.
And I tell you what, the food was good. What did the stew they had?
Irish stew.
Irish stew. Now they had some good Irish stew in it.
I
Is that what happened to your
never
goat?
ate a thing in there.
What happened to your goat? We got off the subject.
Oh well, I was going to tell you about the goat. The goat went to town with her whenever she went uptown in the store.
Just follow you or just
Yeah,
on
just
leash?
follow her. She didn't have no leash. And wherever she went, that goat went. And when she kept him there when we were living in town until the goat got so big one day, she went in the house and shut the door and shut the screen door, and the goat butted the screen out the door and went on in. And when Daddy come in, he jumped about high as that ceiling there, and he said, "The goat's got to go." So he said, "You know who got that? Boy, get that goat and carry him down to the farm and put him with your goat." So I carried him down there and put him over the fence, and they were right side the highway, and he stood right there in that spot. I know for 2 or 3 weeks. Every time anybody go by, he played at him. He played at him. Anytime a car go by, you know.
I can remember making Daddy take me out on Sunday afternoons to see the goats.
Yeah.
Because I was scared that he was going to kill the goat and barbecue
I
it.
wouldn't know you were scared I was gonna kill him, cause that was my goats out there, and I was the one that, I was the one that
Barbecued
killed
those
the
goats,
goat.
and I did not trust him. And every Sunday afternoon, they can take me out there to be sure the goat was still alive.
That was how I made my spending money back then. I had the goats out there and ran in the woods, and every Saturday morning, we'd go down there in the stockyard and kill goats and dress them. And I had my little horse and buggy,
Sell them for 75
and I'd put them in there, and I'd sell them for 75 cents a quarter. I'd get $3 at the boat, through the quarters, you know, and I'd go up through the quarter, and I'd sell all I kill every Saturday, you know. And that's how I made my money. Of course, I'd already pay them about $1 for the goat, you know, at the most, you know, and then I was keeping them down there on the
And
farm,
mine
too.
you got free.
You know what? You know what? These young people would drop dead if they knew that even when we were seniors in high school and beyond that, sometimes when
In
we
college.
were in college,
College.
Daddy would load up all those
A wagon.
wagon with watermelons and cantaloupes and
The three of
hampers
us had the
peas.
best time.
And we'd get on that thing and go through the nigger quarters and just, you know,
Watermelons.
watermelons and cantaloupes, and they were coming out of every house, stopping us to buy a 25-cent watermelon or, you know, a dime cantaloupe or whatever.
Well, you know, I've got one memory of when we used to go down, the whole family went down to the coast.
Seal.
Yeah, to the coast.
I don't think we did that but one time, did we?
Yeah, we did
did
one
when
that
I was
quarter. One
real
time
young.
that I remember is we went
When you were
crabbing,
young.
and we caught all kinds of crabs and had them in the tub and set them in the house. And the next morning, all the crabs were out of the tub running all over the house. And everybody would sit there, you could hear them hollering all over the house, you know. Somebody, oh, there's a crab in here. They were running all I won't ever forget that. But that was a long time ago.
You were a lot younger than I was. I was in the 8th grade. I remember Frank McMahon and
Well,
Thomas
who's
and
the
them
crowd
had
here?
just
Who's
moved back
yeah.
here from Texas.
Hi, Tina.
And I remember Aunt Matt though got sick, desperately sick while we were down there.
Where'd y'all stay at the Village Hotel?
One
We in cottages that we rented. Just the cottages. I don't know.
Just like a baby boy.
But we didn't get to stay the whole week because Aunt Matt got sick.
Lori, you mentioned your buggy. What I remember about your buggy is, I bet you do too.
Yeah, I know.
He carried me for a ride one day, he and George Whiting, and I was sitting in the back of the back seat.
I had a two-seated buggy.
Yeah,
You know, I
two-seated
could-
buggy. And he pulled through this acre of water in some underbrush back there somewhere. And got right in the middle of it and stopped, and he said, I don't know what we're going to do. He said, the horse won't go, and he said, I can't leave. He said, Elliot, you're going to have to get out and go get us some help. I got out and I waded through that mud. And as soon as I got out, he took off. He was not nice.
You know, you remember talking about that buggy in George Layton. You know, he went down there one day and hooked up by a horse and buggy and took it right and down on it, just was trying to go too fast with it, and he turned that curve down yonder, straight down from where and Clayton them lived. There was a big old tree sitting right in the corner of the road.
Lucy Clayton's.
And he came around too close and he hit that thing and turned the buggy over and tore up my buggy and all. And I didn't know anything about it. He was going to get it or anything, you know. And
That was the story of George Layton's life.
yeah.
That's right.
Everything happened to Joe Slade. He would tear up an anvil, as Joe says.
And not only that, but he and I were the same size, and he'd get a date or something, and he'd go up to my house when I wasn't even there and get my clothes and just throw his old dirty clothes down in the floor and wear my clean clothes out, and I'd have a heck of a time ever getting my clothes back. He did that all the time. And I'll tell you something, and he used to double date with me sometime. And if we'd go out somewhere to eat or something, get a drink or something, he'd order twice or three times as much as anybody else, and didn't ever have a nickel in his pocket when he got through the time to come pay before I ain't got no money. And I said, well, what do you order for? Well, I knew you had money. I knew you were going to pay. And I wound up having to pay for it.
Did you know this guy?
And I bet you,
They lived with
Yeah,
us.
I bet you he'd give them $1,000 $2 checks, and they ain't the first one ever been good. They took them all over town. His mama to have to take them up and whatnot. No, and he wasn't any good when he took them.
I knew when we were children and lived at the Worley place, and they
Did we have a Delco system back then?
yeah, we had the Delco system, but you remember we always traded at Stevens Brothers grocery store. And back then you could buy a nickel box of, it was vanilla wafers with marshmallow center. And then they had nickel boxes of the chocolate wafers.
And Cheez-Its.
And they had also ginger snaps. Well, I would eat the legs off of the table. I wouldn't touch a ginger snap if my life depended on it. I hated those ginger snaps. But somebody picked up ginger snaps and brought them home one day, and they just sort of sat around. Nobody else loved them any better than I did. But Miss Whiting came over there and George Satan was with her, and next thing I knew, the last ginger snap was going down his throat. I know something about you. You are the perfect garbage can. He ate ginger snaps. He ate those ginger snaps. Woo! They were terrible.
That reminds me now when I lived with Jean and Jamarsh was overseas and she had Joe and Bill. Bill was just a little fella toddler.
Oh, he's so cute.
And fat, he loved to eat. She'd feed him and think he was through and put him down and he'd waddle over to the trash can and start pulling.
Started early, didn't you, Bill?
Tell about Joe with the bottle and
Oh gosh! What? When they lived up there in the little house on way up there on North Hardy, above where Hattie lived.
Well, you're trying to go to the cemetery.
Yeah, go to the cemetery. The house was new when they were the first people to live in it, and there was a little young pecan tree out front, and traffic wasn't like it is now. But Joe. We went by one day and she couldn't get him. She couldn't get him weaned. There was just no way. He intended to suck a bottle the rest of his life. And we went by and he had his little wooden rocking chair sitting out there. I can see him right now in my mind's eye, and he had his leg crossed over like this. And he had a little box or table affair here. And he had a quart of milk and his bottle.
You can fill it up?
He had that bottle full, and he was sitting there with that leg crossed over on the knee of the other one. That's far from the road out there, just sitting under the car. I said, look at him. Look at him. We nearly fell out of the car. I thought it was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my life. With this watermelon pulling up his own bottle, sitting on his little table at the bottom over here, pulling up his own bottle. But we rotted him because he was the first.
Oh yeah, I used to come home from college on the weekends just to see Joe. Before I went home, I went to see Joe. I loved him better than
I babysat. I love babysitting. I babysat all the
I
time.
know it. We loved him to death. He was so cute. But I remember the Gene.
What happened to him then?
we were going to say a good story. Gene was the only one that was married, and Daddy underwrote this trip to the beach this particular summer. And he insisted that Gene go with us. Well, Mary said she'd keep Joe. And we were gone for about 5 days. And when we came back, that's when they were still living up there in that little house, and we walked in. And he was back in the back bedroom, and we walked back there, and he turned around and saw his mama. And he went straight to her. He didn't make a sound or anything, and he just was holding on to her. She picked him up, and he just clamped her neck. And these great big tears just began to run down his face. And she held back and looked at it, and then she burst into tears. I couldn't stand it. It was the most touching thing I believe I've ever seen in my life. He was totally silent. He didn't cry out loud, but just big old tears flowing down his cheeks.
Jean was the dearest thing. I tell you what, when we were in high school, she and Joe Marsh were engaged, and she was at home. You know, Joe Marsh was overseas or somewhere, and we used to cut classes every afternoon and go out and visit your mother. And if we didn't have a good time, and she put up with us, actually put up with us all. But we had the best time with her, but she was so sweet to all of us.
She always was. She always was. And you see, we could have overpowered her, 6 of us in our family, but she never, if she was ever irritated or, you know.
You never knew it. I said, when she married Joe Marsh, she took every one of us, you know. She really
You know, one more.
We've been lucky
About
with
the
that.
worst.
We've been lucky with
You
that.
told my tales like that, I'm gonna have to tell a tale about when McCullough Jr. and E.K. and Henry Hill and I went hunting one time. No, I'm gonna tell you one about when we went
I thought
hunting.
you were going to tell
And we were in Mr. Harris's car, in the sheriff's car. That's when he was sheriff and all. And I had a place out yonder where the first place I bought, you know. And so we went out there. There was a lot of doves out there, and we were going hunting. So for some reason or other, my gun was tore up or somebody borrowed it or something. I didn't have one. So I said, we ain't go today. I ain't got a gun. Because Jimmy said, that's all right. I said, Daddy's got a double barrel 12. Said, you're welcome to use it. I said, all right. I said, let's go then. So we got the car, and he went and got the gun and all. We all got loaded up in the car and started out it. And when we went through the first gate, the field was right there on the right, see? And E.K. got out to open the gate and all and let us through and all. And E.K. was out back and all, and the birds just began to get up out of the field everywhere. My cousin Junior said, put some shells in your gun right quick. So I just unbricked that double barrel, threw 2 shells in and bricked it up. When I did it, said, boom! It went out the back of the car, out the top of the car, right out over E.K.'s head back there, and you heard him, E.K. come around, hollering, he looked out, he was laying on the ground, he said, look out, you dead up there, coming out this way. But it blowed a hole that big in top of the sheriff's car. And we spent the rest of the afternoon riding trying to get somebody to fix it. That's what to do, you know. And so we couldn't get anybody to fix it. And so naturally I told my cousin, I said, you put me out of the house. I said, I ain't going out of your house. And I said, Brother Boy, I ain't coming out there in the next few days either. I said, I'm going to wait about it. So anyway, he went home and that night and told Daddy about it. He told Daddy, he said, we went hunting today and said, Bo Reed's gun didn't have a gun, so said, I loaned him your 12 gauge. He said, well, that's all right, son. And so, and he kept on, he said, and Daddy said, you need to have your gun worked on. He said, it's got some problems. He said, well, I'll try to get it. He said, what's the problem, though? He said, well, Daddy said, Bo Reed put 2 shells in and bricked it up and said it just went off like that. No, he said it did. He said, yes, sir. And said, we was in the car. He said, what? Jumped up like that. He was reading the paper, you know, one half listening to it, but when he said we was in the car, that set him on fire. He jumped straight up there. He come out. And so I had told my cousin, I said, hey, coming out here, no. So about 2 days later, my Terrence called me and said, son, said, I just want to tell you, it's all right to come back out here. And said, I ain't going to kill you. I think about that, talking about him, I think about that one over yonder too, when Mr. Harris and them was sheriff and he pulled his car up out there in the driveway and little Joe had seen him fill the car up with gas, you know, and all. So he goes around and gets the water hose and runs it in the gas tank and turns it on. And he goes in the house and tells his granddaddy, said, I filled your car with gas. He said, you did? He didn't think nothing about it, you know. He said, yeah. He went out there and had the water hose in there. It was running out there. And you know how Mr. Harris was. He saw like that. He didn't say nothing real nice right there. He said several pretty ugly words.
A little bit explosive.
Well, y'all want me to tell y'all about the bargain up?
I'm not sure I've got time for that.
Yeah, we do want that story. You might want to start it now.
Well,
If you don't get it, you better start it now.
well, McCullough Jr. and E.K. and And Henry Hill and some of us was riding around one Sunday afternoon, and we decided we wanted to play some cards. So we decided we'd go out to the slough and play cards, and we went McCullough's Jr.'s car, or Mr. Harris's car.
Why would you go to the slough to play cards?
Huh? We were riding around on Sunday afternoon, so we wanted to go out and play some cards, you know. So we decided we'd go out to the slough and play. So we went out there to the slough, and it had been raining cats and dogs for 2 or 3 days, but that didn't, you know, it didn't bother us. So we got out there, and we decided it was too wet to get out and play cards. So we decided we'd just turn around and come back to town. So McCullough Jr. started turning around, and he bogged up. So back then, Daddy was in business with Neil Palmer down in the stockyard, and they both had a big truck down there to haul livestock on. And I had the keys to it. So I said, well, I'll go down there and get Daddy's truck, and I'll pull it out. So I went and got Daddy's truck, you know, and went out there to pull it out, and I bogged Daddy's truck up. So I said, I ain't going to leave it like this. So I said, I'll go get Neil's truck, and I'll pull them both out. So I went and got Neil's truck, and I pulled Daddy's truck out. Well, I should have left it well enough alone, but I said, no, I'm going to get the car while I'm here. So I backed in there to get the car, and I bogged Neil's truck up, and then I bogged Daddy's truck back up trying to get it out. So Daddy had that farm up yonder back, you know, up yonder on where the bullets live, you know. About 10, 12 miles up there, you know. And it was getting late in the evening then, and about that time it started drizzling rain a little bit. And well, I said, I'm going up there and get Daddy trying to get these things out. I said, I ain't going to tell him about it, bogging up all the truck. So went up there, we like never got tried to crank, because you had to crank it by hand, didn't have a starter, you know, you cranked it by hand. And we took turns turning that thing till we finally got it hot enough that it cranked up, and I jumped on it, you know, on an old tricycle farm. It had that old spring seat on it and all, you know, and I got it fired up, and I headed to town, wide open, you know. And so I cut through there by Butler Grocery Company, and where it used to be there, you know, and it was dirt then and all, and the railroad track was about that high, you know, and had those oak trees out there as big as grow, you know. And so I had it real wide open, and I hit that railroad track, and when I did that old spring seat, said, and yonder I went right straight up in there, and I hit that railroad track, and I thought it had broke every bone in my body. All I could do was just lay there and moan and groan. And directly I looked up, and the old tractor done hit one of them big oak trees up there, you know, with the front wheel, and it run halfway up like that. It wrecked it, you know, went dead and rolled back down, you know. And I said, oh my goodness. And they'd already gone on back out there, you know, to where the car was bogged up there. I laid there for a while until I could get up. Finally I got up, and I got over there to see about it and looked at it, and it busted one of the front tires, you know. And I said, well, I run it on the other one, you know. So I messed around, and I finally got it cranked up and got back on and lit out again, and went out there, and I pulled both the trucks out. And said, well, I'm going to get the car too. And I messed around, got in there to get the car, and I bogged the tractor up. I said, this ain't going to work. So I messed around and tried to get it out with the truck and wound up bogging both the trucks up. So I had everything that had bogged up, you know. And I said, this ain't going to do it. It done got late then, and it was drizzling rain too. And so I started to have somebody say, you ain't going to tell him tonight? I said, I'm going to tell him before I go to bed, because I said, ain't no use in me and him both losing sleep. And I said, I know I ain't going to sleep if I had that on my mind all night. So I went in there and I shook him. I said, Daddy, yeah? What is it? I said, Daddy, we bought McCullough Jr.'s car about you in the slough this afternoon. And I said, I went and got your truck to get it out, and I said, I bogged it up. He said, you did? I said, he said, well, go on to bed. I said, Daddy, I went back and got Neil's truck to get it out, and I said, I bogged it up too. He said, my gosh. He said, go on to bed. We'll see about it in the morning. I said, Daddy, I went to the farm and got your tractor, and I bogged it up too. He jumped straight up in bed. I don't ever get, you couldn't find nothing else to bog up, son? I said, no, sir, you didn't have nothing else. And, boy, he was hot. So the next morning he had to get the county farm to go stand out there and get those things out. And they get by. We done worked that ground up where it was just soup, you know. We've been bogged it up so much, you know.
Who ever won the card game?
We never did get around to playing any cards. I was thinking about that. We didn't play any cards all the time. And we'd go out there and play cards, you know, and a lot of times whatnot, and just ride through the slough and all. And that's where everybody used to go out there, you know, at night when they were growing up, sporting around with little girls and all. And they'd go out there, you know, and love around a little bit. And so it was a real popular place. Real popular.
Went out there courting in the slough. You raise your hands?
Hey, ask the one, ask the one to raise a hand that didn't go out there. That'd be better. Ask the one to raise a hand that
See, y'all
didn't go
always
out
talk
there.
about the slough. I never, for the best of my knowledge, I never, I'm serious.
Listen to that
I've never
now.
heard of the slough.
You know what I'm
I
curious
still
about?
don't know where it was.
How many trucks, if he had more trucks, when would you have stopped?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd have stopped all night because when I stopped, I had to go home and catch it. That's what I knew. So I didn't stop till it was all over.
You asked me to know George Layton. When I was drafted in the service, he was still hanging around over there with motor racing. And I stayed in service while when I came home on leave, I didn't have any clothes. He took them off and had them altered. I didn't have a thing to wear except a uniform.
He was a character if there ever been one.
He still is a character.
Yeah, I know he is.
But you remember the nurse that was putting folks out of the misery?
Oh yeah. She almost got him.
She almost got him. She almost got George.
Yeah. Maples girl. She was that Maples man's daughter.
Yeah.
Around that whole angel of death.
I taught his daughter at the vocational school, and she was a real sweet girl.
You did.
The one that did that?
No.
She must have had a real good mama.
Yeah, George Layton's daughter.
Well, now
She must have had a real good mama.
the family was sweet. I mean, they were generally. Demi Whiting was his final man, and Tom Akery was, and Eunice was sweet, and Ruth was, but then there was George Layton. Who knows?
And the girls married preachers, and
all of them.
And when the mama died, they all sang the
Tom Akery was the preacher because he married Tilly and Charles Arwood.
Who what now?
He was the preacher for Tilly and Charles Arwood's wedding.
Well, Eunice divorced, didn't she? Her
And
preacher.
she was the black sheep of the family. They had the worst time with that. They weren't very godly about it. They acted like she died.
I know it.
Treated her like an outcast, a pariah. And I lost my faith in their faith right there.
Where did she move to? She moved to Louisiana?
No, she lived in Nevada.
Nevada.
She divorced?
Yeah, she was divorced. Her mama married her off to that guy because she thought that he was going to go she was going to inveigle him into the ministry, and she did. And he became a missionary to Brazil. And she nearly died with sinus problems down there. The weather just never killed her, and she had 4 children. Never was happy. She was the unhappiest person you ever saw. And she finally left him.
What was his name? Parks Renshaw?
Park Renshaw. It wasn't Parks. It was Park.
Just Park. I don't know how I drove that up.
He's one of the best looking men I've ever seen. He was absolutely one of the best looking men I've ever seen.
The other night, I was
I don't know where you ought to be listening to all this tonight.
There were about 15 of them out there. And I was running around trying to sling the hash together, and I got fussing about being so old I couldn't remember anything. And my youngest son says, "Mama, you're old enough to hide your own Easter eggs."
That's also true. We are.
Yes, we are.
And then we can't find them. That's right. Yeah, that's good.
Lori, did Granddad ever take you with him on the? Dad used to tell me about taking the horses in the summertime and going up to the horse races.
Oh yeah, I used to
Hockey
go to
was
horse
the
races.
one that had to do that.
Hottie went up there, and they left him up there to keep the trainer straight all up there.
Did they really?
Dr. Pop Pearson, that was the trainer's name, and he loved the Bible.
He was bad to drink.
And
that was the one to go up there and keep him straight.
go ahead, Jesse.
For about a year, sleeping in the horse stalls and on an army cot, and maybe in the truck seat. It wasn't Howard Johnson by a long shot.
Go ahead and tell him how you broke him up, though.
Well, he come in every night, just polluted. So, old man Ben Hill Cochran had told me, he said, well, he said, I tell you how you can break him. Said, get hold of his bottle and put a little bit of calomel in it. Now, that'll break him up.
Calomel.
Uh-huh.
Y'all know what cat?
Oh,
that's all the time.
No, they don't know because they don't even sell it anymore.
Like cod liver oil or something?
That was cod liver oil was a dream.
Pink laxative.
It was horrible.
So I put it in there. And he drank most of it. Next day or two, boy, I mean, he was puny. But that didn't last long.
That didn't cure it.
Then he kind of sparked up because he hide the bottle from it.
Well, Uncle T, I think, I don't know who all knows about this, but I think you do know the story about the fella. It was a fella who worked with Granddad, I think, but maybe you and Daddy were friends of his, and he killed a man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Bud Jones.
Bud Jones,
yeah.
A black man.
Can you tell us that story?
Daddy more or less raised him. In other words, he just picked him up when he was a kid.
And he raised Hottie and Joe Morris.
Yeah.
And
Bud Jones did.
After he got to be about, as best I remember, around 25, 28 years old, he was always extremely mean, especially when he was drinking.
Well, he was built like a brick wall.
Yeah.
He really was. He was monstrous.
And there was a guy here in town that ran a blacksmith shop across from Dad's livery barn over there. And the guy was selling whiskey, moonshine. And he sold this guy some of it, so Bud Jones sold him some of it. And later on that night, he went back over there and got some more. Well, this was back in the Depression.
The 30s.
Just a little bit of money was, and the man had a Model A Ford. And so Bud Jones knocked him in the head, took his money, and took his car and went to Florida.
But don't forget that he took Mr. Norris and threw him under Lula Jones's house that was built up on pilots, and she was terrified of everything and kept.
She was our washwoman.
Washwoman kept everything. That was Jones's mother, Bud Jones's mother, and he threw that man up under his house, under her house.
On Mama's porch.
He was so much of a man. They brought him back, I believe, to Tifton. And the sheriff didn't want to go over there and get him. He was scared of him. And he asked Daddy to go with him. And Daddy said, yeah, I'll go with him. And when they got over there, they wanted to put shackles on him and handcuffs and everything. Daddy said, you don't need none of that. He'll do whatever I tell you. And Dad told him to get in the back seat, and he got in the back seat with him, and they rode all the way back over here, and they put him in jail. And of course, they finally convicted him and electrocuted him.
All right.
And the Sunday afternoon before they were to carry him to Reedsville or wherever the electric chair was, all the niggers in town were down there having an all-day sing that Sunday afternoon. And we always rode around on Sunday afternoon. And Daddy stopped out in front of the jail. And he went over there just to speak to Jones because he knew they were going to carry him off in a minute.
Yeah, I went over there with him. I went to speak with him.
Yeah.
Well, Mama had put him in the kitchen, see, for years.
But he
and
said...
when they convicted him and were fixing to take him off, he sent word he wanted Mama to come up there, but she wouldn't go. She said, no, can't do it.
Who was the one that stabbed somebody with a pitchfork? Was that him?
That was Wild Bill Black. Called him Black. And his name was Wild Bill. Well, what happened was he was working with Daddy and all, and he was courting this woman, and he and this woman had a falling out. They were common law wife. It was his common law wife, and they had a falling out. And he went around there one night, and they got in a fuss, and I think he abused her a little bit or something. And she was working for Pritchard up yonder at the restaurant up there in town. And she went up there complaining to him and all, and so he just pulled out and gave her a pistol and said if he come back tonight and bothered, he said, kill him. So he went back that night and was bothered, and she took that pistol and killed him. And that was one that worked for Dad. He was the one that raised me now.
Who was the one? I remember one night it was sometime and we ate on
That's
the back
what I was
porch.
fixing to
Ate
tell.
on the back porch at night.
Ooh, I'm
And
happy.
my back
He
was
came
to
up on
the
the steps.
back here. And we were eating, and all of a sudden, pitch black dark, and all of a sudden this voice said, Mr. Dan, Mr. Dan.
He was running from
He said,
something he had done.
He had killed somebody with a pitchfork.
He killed a
stabbed
man.
him with a
He
pitchfork
had
and
killed
been
a
hiding
man.
in the
And he was hiding. He'd been hiding all day, and he asked that, Mr. Dan, what you want me to do? What you want me to do? And Daddy told him, said, you go on back. Said, where have you been? And he said, over under the American Legion house over there, which was about a block from where we lived. And he said, hiding under that house. And Daddy told him, said, you go back over there, and said, I'll get the sheriff to come down there and get you. And he did, but I never knew who he was. Did you?
Well,
You
I was
remember
thinking
that, though?
Black was the name that I
That
remember.
might have been Wild Bill, I don't know
But
about
I
that.
remember it was somebody that had been around so much that I just loved him. You know,
It
and I
wa-
felt
it
so
wasn't
comfortable
Black
with
Who
him.
got stabbed in the field with I can't.
No,
that's Booster.
Booster.
The snow was about a
Booster
year
Jones.
or more older.
Yeah,
got killed.
Booster got picking an old Silas. I can't think of what his first name was. Out there in the field, they were working together, you know. And Silas didn't have half good sense. And Booster got out there and got to messing with him, enjoying at him and whatnot, you know. And they got to fighting, and they was stacking peanuts with pitchforks. And so they got to fighting, and he knocked Booster down and got right up on him with pitchfork and did like that on him, come down on him, and it just hit right up there and just followed his skull around, you know. And he thought he'd killed him, and then he run, told Daddy about it, and Daddy went out there and picked Booster up and carried him to the hospital and all, got him fixed up, but he lived all right.
Who was that nigga that killed Booster?
Oh, that was old Chris. He lived down there on Pop King's place.
Ain't nothing wrong with his memory,
Right
is
in front of the SNAP.
Nothing wrong with his
That
memory.
little block house.
Y'all talking about Black. Now I'm gonna have to tell y'all a story about he raised me, and Wild Bill was his name. And he raised me, and Daddy sent me all over the country with him. And getting back to the racehorse business, Daddy, when he was in the racehorse business, had racehorses in El Dorado, Illinois. And so they needed a truck up there to haul them around on, you know, from one racetrack to the other. So he sent me and Black up there to carry the truck and come back. And I was a teenager. I don't know how old it was, but it'd been a long time. And so we got up there and we were out there at the track, and I hadn't been there but a few minutes. And this fella come up there, and me and the nigga was walking along together. This fella come up to me and pulled me on the arm. Said, "Is he with you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You better keep him with you." Said, "There ain't another one in El Dorado in this county." Said, "They don't allow him in this county." And said, "Somebody will kill him." And he overheard it, you know. Well, from then on, he was in my back pocket. I even had to sleep out there in the stall with him at night and all, you know, because he was that scared, you know, because, you know, down here, he just didn't have that kind of problem. So we started home, and we got on the train coming home, and there was one seat left over there by a white woman, and he wouldn't sit down. He was stood in the back of the bus, train and all, you know, we were up north. And so he sat in the back of the train, stood in the back of the train until we crossed the Mason-Dixon line. And when we crossed the Mason-Dixon line, they put him in another car and left me up there, you know, and all. And he thought we were, when we got into Atlanta and all, and before I could get off the train, I looked out there, and he was running up and down the track, hollering, "Bowery, Bowery, oh, Bowery!" He just thought he done lost me, and he knew he wasn't coming home without me, because it'd be fatal, you know. So he was supposed to be living after me. And so he was scared to death. I'm telling you right now, he was frantic. And when I stepped off of that train and hollered at him, he come up there, and I thought he was going to squeeze me to death, you know, choking on. Grabbed me around the neck and all. Oh, Lord, he was good, glad to see me.
Do you remember when you and E.K. in the wreck in the truck.
Yeah.
In my head.
Up in Great Georgia.
Great.
And little Joe, EK was in the bed and couldn't get up, and little Joe got a shotgun. Y'all remember that out of the closet? And he was walking around with that shotgun, and everybody was
EK was in the house, yeah.
And EK was his mother's. He was at our house.
His ankle was so messed up.
And he couldn't move, and everybody got out. Joe was standing there with him.
Waving it around at everybody.
I'm gonna have to tell y'all about that too while you're talking about it. You know, we had the wreck and all, and the EK was driving, and it broke his leg. So we had run into a service station and brought the service station down on us. The only thing that was driving semi, and the only thing that saved our lives, both doors flew open, and one of us fell out each door, all but our legs. And of course, I was on the side where the service station was, so all the brick and all just fell right on top of me, and they just beat my face all to a frazzle, you know, and all. And so, EK, they got him out pretty quick and sent him on to the hospital. And they couldn't get me out, and the truck caught on fire. And this semi was going by with a nigger driving, and they wouldn't let him stop. They had to take patrol out and wouldn't let him stop. And he saw it was on fire, and he had a fire extinguisher, and he just reached down and threw it out the window. And they took that fire extinguisher and put the fire out. But they finally got records out and pulled the thing apart enough to get me loose, you know. And then they carried me to the hospital. And when I got there, EK was still laying out in the hall, and they put me in the hall, too. Wouldn't do nothing about it to us, you know.
They didn't know who
he was, or who was going to pay the bill. And they were announcing it on the radio. And a good friend of Daddy's lived in Macon and had been in this hospital for a long, long stay. And he heard it on the radio, and he came out and he said, y'all put him in my room. Said, I got a room out there. He said, put him in it. And said, take care of him right now. Said, I don't mean later, now. So they went to work on us and all, you know, and got us in good shape and all, and I thought I was doing real good. And so I was laying up there in the bed, and they had my whole head bandaged up and all, you know, all you could see was my 2 eyes. Reckon they brought Mama in down there, and she, oh, my son, he's running for life, oh, he's running. Went to crying and hollering and screaming. I thought, well, I must be dying. You know? I thought I was thinking die showing up then, you know, it like scared me to death. But all I could hear right now, oh, my son, he's run for life. Started crying and carried on. Lord.
Y'all demolished that service station. I remember that.
You know what happened was we were coming, when we went in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we went and got a load of rice seed. And we were having trouble with the brakes. So I went to one of the big truck stops and had them worked on. Well, he didn't get them fixed. So when we came down over that hill, coming down the hill, and there was a bridge down there, and then there was a curve. And on that curve, it was a station sitting there. Well, we started on air horns. We opened air horns up and all, you know. And there were 2 cars in front of us. And one of them right in front of us realized something wrong. He pulled around the other car and shot on off out of the way, you know. And the other one was an old man, an old woman, an old car. And they just kept chugging along, you know, chug, like that, you know. Well, we were coming to the bridge, and we couldn't get around, and another car was coming, so we didn't have any choice but just hit them in the back. So we hit them in the back like that, and the back of that old car looped around and bumped on the truck and all, you know. And as soon as we got across the bridge, we pushed them all the way across the bridge. As soon as we got across the bridge, they snatched their car out of the road, see. Well, it snatched the front end of the truck out of the road, and when we broke loose from them, we were in that station. We didn't have no choice in it, you know. And it brought all that station down on top of us. But the station was closed. That was the thing that I good part about it.
Yeah. Stayed like that for years.
Yeah.
That's the way he always.
Now,
did Granddad, just change this up, but when he became mayor, is that something he wanted to do, or that just happened to him?
What?
That's because he lived here all his life and knew everybody in the county, and he just, because he loved Camilla. That was what he just wanted to do.
He was mayor for 18 years, I reckon, wasn't he?
Why he was mayor, why he went.
He was mayor for 18 years, wasn't he?
19.
18, 20 years.
Both of you got it wrong. He was 21.
I started to say it was over 20. But
He's old, he might know.
I thought it was 19.
I mean, was it something he worked at, or did he just...
No.
Not here, you don't. I mean, you know, if you went to the
went to the
ran
meetings.
meetings
Back then,
on
there
Monday
wasn't nothing
night.
but a one-horse town, you know, and,
Mostly nobody else wanted it.
yeah.
And Daddy was not a speaker. He was not, the kind
People
of
were
person that
calling all
went around
around
speaking.
tonight for all kinds of problems.
And he was about the only one in town that would put up with people calling him all hours of the night.
About the barking dog.
About the barking dogs. Anything go wrong in town, they'd call him, you know, didn't we? But I'm going to tell you another
Just
little
back
tale
down.
about that. There was one fella in Camilla that didn't call. He wrote letters. And he was always writing Granddad a letter, you know, about this, that, and the other. So Daddy got tired of it one day, and he went down there and told him, he said, now listen, if you got something you want to discuss with me, said, all you got to do is call me or come by, and I'm available anytime. Said, don't write me another nasty letter. Said, dude, I'm coming down here. He ran a cotton warehouse down there all the time. So it wasn't too long before Daddy got another letter from him. So he just good his word. He went down there, and when that fella saw him come in the front door and all, he run back there in the cotton warehouse. Daddy went back there and run him all over that cotton warehouse. You know, Daddy was pretty old then, both of them were. And so they both finally give out, and Daddy never did catch him, you know. But he told me, he said, now if you write me another letter, so I'm coming down here, and I'm going to stay till I do catch you next time. And so, but there was things like that, you know, happened back in those days, and it was just the way people lived back then, different from the way they live now.
Daddy was completely civilized.
He had a lot of faults, but he had the most compassion. At times you could just see it.
Yeah.
So, you know, he just felt so deeply.
Well, he
about
loved everybody.
Well, he believed in fair treatment.
He did.
Now, that was the thing that he believed in, and he tried to treat everybody alike, you know, and that was the reason the whites, the blacks, and everybody voted for him, you know, when he ran. And but he did get beat one time. There was a drunk beat him in town one time.
Reformed alcoholic.
Yeah, he was a reformed alcoholic. Well, he's supposed to have been
was a son
reformed,
of
but he
Daddy's
wasn't.
first
He wasn't reformed.
Yeah.
But his daddy was a big bank, had been a big banker around and all, and owned a lot of stock, and they were rich. And so he ran against Daddy and beat Daddy one time, you know. But then next time Daddy beat him, they would take.
Just before the war or after the war?
That was right during the war, right after the war, that he was defeated that
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
He was chairman of
And
the
let me-
draft board for years.
Yeah.
How long?
He'd take anything and nobody else wanted. Just like being chairman of the draft board, you know. Nobody wanted it, no.
Unpopular cause.
It was unpopular and it paid nothing. It was just free gratis, see. And he took it and all, and he ran it like it ought to have been run and all, and he got a guy on there that wanted to send everybody to the army, you know, and Daddy said no. Said if they're farming and all, that's as important as all as anything else, and if they're going to college, this, that, and that other guy didn't want to do it. But they did it anyhow. Daddy stuck with it, and he pretty well got his way before it was over with, you know. But he did a lot of free gratis work.
One time when he was running for mayor, Mr. John Butler ran against him. And
Yeah.
Mr. John Butler got, was it 41 votes?
48, I believe.
48 votes. And he came out and said, well, that was the saddest day of his life. All of his friends had died but 40. All of his friends were dead except the 48.
Well, tell your story about cousin Rose Bags. And
that was Byron's mom.
I know it. That's what
The
made me
one
think
that
of
beat
Cousin
Daddy
Rose
that
Bags.
time, they lived across the street from us,
yeah.
you know. And in this house with the big white columns and all. And,
It's still there. It's
Yeah.
just been restored.
and they had, Conrose had a uniformed chauffeur, and she had a big limousine, you know, with a little pull down seat in the back.
With big brims like this.
Oh,
everywhere
yes.
she went.
And
When she
as a
sat on the
child,
front porch, she had
Well,
one.
that.
when I was a child, Conrose was just, to get to ride in her limousine with a chauffeur and get to sit on a little pull-down seat was the most exciting thing in the world. But every now and then, Mother would take me by the hand and say, let's go visit Conrose. And Conrose, I always sat on that front porch and rocking in one of those high-back rockers, and like Ellen said, she wore every day, all day long, this big hat, floppy brim hat with
flowers or fruit just drooling off of it. And she was one of these little round tub women, and she had a corset that corseted from up under her armpits down to her hips, you know, just straight up and down. But one day, Mother said, let's go see Conrose. I said, okay. So we go, as I recall, it was like springtime or something, you know. And so we go over there to see Conrose, and I was sitting on the steps, and Mother and Conrose up there just rocking, you know. And Conrose says, Little Eileen, you want some candy? Well, I always wanted candy, you know. I said, oh, yes, ma'am. She said, well, go in there in the living room and get you some candy. So I went in, and living room off to the left, you know, and so I go in there, and there, in front of the fireplace, was a little tea table with a big tray, a big silver tray on it, of fruit and candy that evidently had been there since Christmas.
The fruit too?
The fruit had gray fuzz on it, and it was just all in this big gray fuzz. And I looked at it, and I can remember standing there forever and ever thinking, what am I going to do? I thought, I can't eat it.
So you just ate 2 pieces
left. And it was one of the most horrible dilemmas for me as a child, and I stood there the longest time. And there was nothing in me that could make me touch this. And I finally turned around and went back out, and she said, well, honey, didn't you want the candy? No, ma'am, I changed my mind.
You know, talking about it was her son that beat Daddy that time and all. And he was a real drunk, spoiled, and everything else.
Oh, he was a nightmare.
And he used to go to all the jukes, and he always carried a pair of brass knuckles in his pocket and everything, you know, and all. And got in lots of trouble, and they got him out. And they had a nigger that lived in a little house there behind them, and he'd come through in that big old Lincoln he had, you know, after he'd outrun the state patrol and all. He'd blow the horn when he went through the nigger's yard, and he'd know something's up, so he'd jump up, go out and get the water hose and run it across the motor, you know. So when they came, he'd tell them he'd been there in bed all night and all, you know, when the state patrol finally got there. And things like that. But one night, he came out and was sitting out there in the flower bed between
our house.
Yeah.
Betty Stratford and I drove up in the front yard, and Betty said, who is that? She said, I said, well, I don't know. She said, is that hot tea? He was in his underwear.
DVDs.
Yeah, and Mama and Granny had been sitting on the porch, spring porch, watching.
And me.
He watched him come across the road, and he made the turn somewhere and then just fell into the fire.
And Mother got Granny and me up. She said, go in the house, go in the house.
Yeah.
So Granny and I go in and look out.
Cousin Rose, with all of her dignity and her big hat, she had to come in and lead him back across the street.
Oh, I know.
One time, though, he was that like that, and he was in the flower bed over there in front of their house, and this nigger woman was coming down the sidewalk there in front of him, and he was sitting there, and she didn't see him. He got there about there, and he jumped out in front of him and threw up his hand and hollered at her. And boy, she went back to town. I'm telling you, about as fast as you ever saw one. She crossed the street and came back down outside. She got down there in front of him, and he stepped out in the street and hollered at her again with nothing on, you know, except a little pair of undershorts, you know. And this kid that wants best, she went around that corner down there. You can just about see dust flying up on that pavement. No, I mean, she was strolling here. He like scared her to death. And then one other time, you know, one went up into his yard, to his house, knocked on the door to see Cousin Rose about something, and he had that great big old Great Dane dog, you know, and he took that dog on him. And they run and jumped the fence, that old iron fence out there in front to try to get away from the dog, and hung his leg and broke a leg. And that never did do. It wasn't never done.
He kept that old Great Dane just for meanness.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
You know, Cousin Rose had a half sister. Well, a half sister named Miss Ellen.
Miss Ellen.
And Miss Ellen was sort of retarded, and she was scared of her own shadow, and she always hung her head. She wouldn't look up at you. She was so timid. But every day, Conrose would give her a little money, and she'd get a little basket, a little shopping basket on her arm, and she'd walk uptown to the dime store. And she'd spend her money, and she'd buy all this little junk in the dime store. And then come back home, and I can still see her just shuffling along. She'd sort of shuffle her feet, holding it with her head down like this. And one day Lulu says, you know, if it's true that the meek are going to inherit the earth, Miss Ellen's got locks on half of it.
Well, we haven't mentioned Joe Morris, but when he was in service and would come home, I used to wonder, Mother was happier when he was at home than any other time. Do y'all remember that?
So it made me feel bad.
Yeah. Well, she must love him better than she does me.
Anybody.
But he used to chase her. You know how reserved Mother was. But I would look up and Mother would be running around the dining table and Joe Morris would be after her. And I don't know what that was about. I don't remember. But she'd just be dying.
In 1945, Joe Morris was stationed at Camp Hood, Texas.
Oh, dear Lord.
And he was fixing to go overseas. And he had a little old Oldsmobile coupe. And so I was supposed to go, I was enrolled at ABAC and to go to ABAC. And so Lulu and Jean and myself
EK, don't forget EK.
and EK took him out to Camp Hood, Texas.
And when you sat in the back, you were breathing on the neck of the people in the front seat.
Yeah, so Joe Morris drove out there, and it didn't take us long to get out there, you know. But the thing about it is, when we got ready to come home, I was supposed to be in school the next day. So we had to drive straight through coming home, you know. And I was driving all night from Texas coming in. Couldn't get nobody to drive and all, you know. And we got over there in Alabama.
We were talking
that morning for day, and this semi whooped right out in front of me, and I had to get on all the brakes that thing had, and the tires squealing and everything. And everybody said, don't you want me to drive? Don't you want me to drive? Don't you? I said, no, I didn't none of y'all want to drive all night. I said, I'm going to make it the rest of the way now. But I tell you what, they didn't anybody go to sleep anymore. That's why I had to sleep. And so I got on home, and then I had drove all night, and then I had to go right on to school, see, when I got home.
That was some kind of trip.
It sure was.
Did y'all assume that when Joe Morris went off, when he was coming back, that he would probably come back to Camilla?
No, I didn't assume that. Now he did come back, and that's where they lived up there at the little house. That's where they lived when Joe was little. But then he was working as the city engineer, and it was something like $125.
He was in the meatpacking business first.
Yeah. No, he wasn't. That was the first thing he did when he was living in the little house up there. That was the first thing he did. And then it went into the meatpacking business because that was after I was.
Well, when he got out
there, I was married.
And then after he was in the meatpacking business for a while, he decided he wanted to go back to service.
Yeah.
So he went back in service.
But I mean, after he went back into service and then did his final retirement, did you assume he'd come back to Camilla?
No, we didn't
we didn't assume anything. Gene always said after they
did business with y'all then.
Yeah, James Davis and Dad and all, and they had a meat packing plant down there across from where his livestock barn used to be. You know, it was in there.
Man, what did Gene say?
Gene, once they lived in Hawaii, she said that was heaven on earth to her. That was where she wanted to retire to when they got ready to retire, because the temperature was so constant. She loved it there. She really did. She truly loved it there. But then as time went on, though, she decided she liked the change of seasons, you know.
It was after that she had the children out at the ocean. She always loved the beach, so
yeah.
And then she changed totally after that experience, you know, where the shark got the child.
Yeah.
Where was that? I don't remember that at all.
They left. Joe Morris was in service, and they were wherever he was.
Isle of Palms? Was that at Isle of Palms? Okay, I went to visit them once there because I was in Georgia then.
A little boy got attacked, is that right?
Yeah, Joe and I and this little boy, the three of us were out in the shallows there, you know, not very far off, not very far off the beach there, and three of us were throwing a ball back and forth between us, you know, sort of in a triangle there, and we were just standing, you know, I don't know, 10, 15 feet apart. And all of a sudden, it's, you know, he just screamed. And my mom was sitting on the beach, you know, she's supposed to be watching us, and she's sitting up there in a little chair, you know, just watching us. And but she wouldn't have watched us because, you know, you don't constantly stare at them, you know, kids. It's so when and he screamed or whatever, you know, I guess she could tell by the scream, but Joe and I just kind of looked at each other and thought he was clowning around, you know. She was out there like a flash and grabbed him out of the water.
Not before we were in, though, because we saw the water turn.
Yeah, it was red. She said, we ran for the beach, but she ran up there and grabbed him. And I remember we were so amazed because she wrapped his leg up, was all bitten up by the shark, you know, bleeding with blood everywhere. And she just grabbed him up under, you know, took him in her arms. And I remember how amazed I was because there was a house a lawn you had to cross, get into the beach from our house. And it was just thick it had to be that thick with sand spurs.
That's what I was going to say.
She just barefoot, she didn't even think of it, just walked.
Those big ones.
Yeah, that big one. That was the straightest shot to the car. So, you know, in front of our house, so she didn't even think about it. She just walked straight through those sand spurs, you know, with him in her arms. And,
I know that was
rushed him
traumatic.
to the hospital.
He survived and everything.
He had, I don't know, a couple hundred stitches or something, you know, all on the side of his leg. You could see the teeth marks, you know, running down the side of his leg there. We felt really fortunate.
I don't remember hearing that story.
I don't remember hearing that before.
Now that would give you a guilty conscience. So if a parent just it tells you can, you know, trust you with their child, it says, you know, yeah, they can go swimming with you. Just, you know, what, just.
Oh, I bet Jean was devastated over that.
Yeah, I remember she never liked the beach anymore.
No,
That was it.
Yeah, it's true. It really
The one time I really thought that she was having a really rough time in the early years. I believe when they sent him to the University of Illinois for his master's, and I think they had pretty rough living conditions. Any of y'all remember that?
The stories I've heard, I think that's where Bill slept in the dresser drawer.
Yeah.
And Joe slept on two chairs pushed together.
Well, that plus the fact that the weather was so so awful up there, you know. When they were up there, they had some temperatures, you know, 30 and 40, 50 below zero up there and all, and how tough it was.
Well, he said that he was so ashamed of where they lived that he would have people drop him off a couple of blocks away, and then he'd walk the rest of the way home. He didn't want anybody to see it.
So were you all happy when they decided to come back?
Oh,
How'd you hear about it?
Oh, he came back and he was going into the pecan business.
Yeah.
He went into the pecan business, but he came out.
He came back before Jean and Patty came because of the season. He got out and Jean couldn't leave because she was teaching and Patty was in school up there. So he came on down here first. He lived down here first. And
Is that when it was Palmer Bostic? Peanut?
Yeah, that was Daddy and Joe.
And Joe and Joe got involved up that Baconton, that Brown fellow.
Yeah.
And he cleaned our plow, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, that was a very inauspicious.
And then Joe Mars rented all the pecans and was up there around Baconton for a while, all my McCollums and everybody's up there. He was going to make a pile of money, and he left the pile.
Yeah, he lost it.
And it didn't work out. And,
he was before his time with that. That's what it was.
Well,
they were not bringing that much.
It wasn't bringing that much, and it was sort of a hit and miss deal back then too, you know, because they didn't know as much about him as they know now. And it was mostly a miss with him.
It was old growth.
Yeah.
Not very profitable.
Uncle Tom, what's some of your favorite stories about Uncle Tom?
About what?
Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom.